It is now 13 minutes to 8. How many are spending this Christmas homeless? It's a word that evokes those that we see sleeping on the streets, but it incorporates thousands of the so-called hidden homeless who've got no permanent home and are forced to move from a temporary bed or a sofa or a floor from one to another. And it's a question our guest editor, the chief scout for the UK, wanted us to explore. In his early 20s, Dwayne Fields was himself homeless, sleeping on trains, on night buses, sometimes just walking all night, a situation he kept secret even from his own friends.
I hid it from a lot of people, actually, and I think I hid it quite well, hiding my bags behind the bins and then going and sitting with my friends as if everything was normal. At the end of the night, when they would go off to their houses, I would go to the bins, pick up my bag and just start walking. And I remember I'd walk from Stoke Newington in London, which is North London, to Streatham, which is South London, and it would take me 4.5 hours to walk that distance, half hours from about 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night there, and 4.5 hours back. Brings me back at around 7 o'clock in the morning when most people are stirring again, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going through.
Dwayne Fields, our guest editor, listening to that. Polly Neate, Chief Executive of Shelter, the housing and homelessness charity. Good morning and happy
Good
Christmas
morning
to you, Polly. I mean, do you have a sense, can you put a figure on the number who've been and are homeless this Christmas?
So there's over 360,000 people homeless at Christmas, and that includes about 161,000 children. That's the closest you can to an accurate figure. But, that story just demonstrated, actually, you can see how it isn't possible to count every single person. And people might be sleeping on a friend's sofa, and, that is homeless, but also that relationship is could break down, or that just might not be possible anymore. And then suddenly they find themselves on the streets. And of course, it includes people who are families, particularly homeless in temporary accommodation. And that's a figure that is absolutely rocketing over the last few years as people simply cannot afford a home because of the cost of private rents and the lack of social housing. So it is an astonishingly high figure.
And those that Dwayne, our guest editor, calls the hidden homeless.
Yeah.
How common is that?
Oh, well, that's in a sense, that's the reason why you can't necessarily get an absolutely 100% accurate figure. And unfortunately, it's very common. So, for example, if you think about rough sleeping is incredibly dangerous. We know there's around 3,900 people sleeping rough on any given night, but that doesn't include everybody because people do hide, particularly women. So it's very likely that the official figures don't count all the women who are sleeping rough, for example, on buses, walking around, and so on. And sleeping on friends' sofas in
just before
arrangements that are
Christmas,
precarious.
the government in Westminster announced an extra almost £1 billion of what it called new funding to tackle and prevent homelessness, money that went to councils in England. What do you make of that sum and what it's likely to be able to achieve?
Well, I mean, like all emergency measures in a crisis, it will alleviate some of the crisis. So in that sense, of course, it's welcome. What it won't do is prevent homelessness from continuing to increase. And the only way to do that is to make housing affordable. The reason, the homelessness crisis effectively is an affordability crisis. Housing benefits isn't keeping pace with rents, it's been frozen again. That's a kind of immediate thing, tipping people into homelessness. People can't afford private rents. So if you can't afford your rent, you will eventually be evicted. Then you can't afford another home and you become homeless. But fundamentally, it's because for decades, we haven't built homes in this country that people on low incomes can afford to live in.
Polly Neate of Shelter, thank you for joining us.
And that brings us to 9 minutes to 8.